So Mark Zuckerberg announced that the company has set aside $3 billion to deal with the legal ramifications of the FTC's investigation into whether Facebook violated the agreement they had with them when we saw that data breach related to Cambridge Analytica. So to talk more about this, we're joined by Dan Howley from Yahoo Finance. Dan, what's the latest on this investigation, and when do you think Facebook might actually be fined?
So the investigation is still ongoing. They wouldn't even speak about it on their earnings call, outside of the fact that they said they put aside $3 billion in their recent quarter to pay a potential fine. We're probably not going to hear much about it until the FTC makes an announcement as to how much it's going to or how hard it's going to come down on Facebook. But the company itself has said, yeah, they're looking at between $3 and $5 billion, and that's nothing to sneeze at. It would be a huge fine for the company. One of the previous fines for a tech company for this kind of breach of a consent decree was Google, and that was in the millions. So obviously they're trying to send a message here to Facebook and to every tech company to basically say, look, you guys have the keys to the kingdom when it comes to people's privacy, and you're just giving it away. You know, you're not taking care of what people rely on you to take care of. And so as a result, we're going to take billions of dollars from your coffers. And, nobody seems to really care. The stock is up after the earnings because they had user growth over the last quarter, not in the U.S. or Europe, mind you. The U.S. was flat. Europe had a little bit of growth, but it was what they call other parts of the world in Asia that saw the most growth. And so that translates to advertisers seeing that and then spending more money on the platform, which translates to investors dumping more money into it. And nobody seems to care that they're getting fined.
I wonder if that's being overlooked, though, in terms of, yes, analysts are still sticking by it. Some actually upgraded their price target on the back of it. But when you break down the earnings numbers that came out yesterday and you look at what's happening over in Europe, biggest deceleration, it was up 18% year on year, but you compare that to 24% in Q4, 50% jump in the same time last year. I look at those numbers and say, well, regulation is starting to take hold over there. That's clearly having an impact. So if Europe is leading the conversation on that, should analysts be looking at those numbers a little closer to say, if that's the type of regulation that takes shape in other parts of the world, maybe Facebook does need to start worrying. Maybe analysts need to start looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things to really, look at with regards to this fine in particular is how much it cut into the company's margins. They were cut down to, I think it was 20%, around 20%, and they're usually hovering between 40 and 50%. That's a huge number. And so you're right, with Europe having a lot more regulation and being ahead of the U.S. there and being stricter with it, they're more willing to call out a company and say, look, you need to, this needs to be addressed. That we're going to fine you. They've done it to Google before. Facebook is obviously in the same kind of category. So I think you're right. They do need to look closely at this. But as far as investors are concerned, hey, if advertisers are going to be spending the money because there's still more people coming, then it's, no skin off our nose.
And I wouldn't say that it's necessarily the case that no one cares about the fine, but I interpret it as everyone is deciding that as big as this fine is, well, this is the final fine. Like, they'll pay this fine and maybe that'll be it, which there's no guarantee of that.
With the U.S.,
but there's a little something that...
But they're treating it like this. It won't get any worse than this in terms of fines, which may not be right.
But there's something that bothers me a little bit about that, because, for example, if I get pulled over for a speeding ticket from a cop, I can't negotiate the price of my ticket. So how is it that Mark Zuckerberg gets to set the price of the FTC fine? Isn't that supposed to be painful?
Yes, it is. And I think that's why the amount is so huge here. I mean, sure, Facebook is a multi-billion-dollar company. They pull in billions of dollars of revenue each year or each quarter. But, this is still a huge amount. And as Dan said, there's no guarantee that they won't get hit again for a fine. And with regulation coming, you assume at some point, if Congress can get its act together, they could face more fines in the future in the U.S. and definitely abroad because the EU is just willing
to... And it's not just Europe, right?
No, it's not.
There's so many other countries that are following Europe's lead in regulation. So
exactly.
More fines coming on that front.
Dan Howley, thanks so much. Thanks for joining us.